2. After watching video 1, you've got the preparation stuff happening and everything's ready to go. And in this video, we'll go ahead and deal with selecting breeders from one of the hardest fish to get specific fish out of an aquarium, and select those breeders and also get them spawning, get them put together and get the spawning going, and get ready for video 3 where we actually deal with 5. So enjoy. Thank you. Now the males, they're okay. So you look at the male group and you go, oh, how cool! Their color looks great. Oh, these are awesome. Let's pick the 5 best to be the breeders. So it doesn't make any sense to look at a specific fish at this point, because there's no way you're going to get a net in the tank and get that fish. Someone once told me that the Odessas are the fastest fish you can keep in a home aquarium, and I don't doubt it at all. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to feed them really good, and then I'll show you how to go ahead and pick a specific fish. Now with the females, it's a different story. Here's the tank of females. I make sure that there definitely is not a male in here. You can put a couple of females in with the males, but you don't want any males in with the females. And these guys, they just get fed well. I do a couple things here I'm going to go into in a second, but as a rule I don't start feeding them heavy or anything like that. If they're healthy and they're well fed, they'll plump up and fill up with eggs. My experience, I used to think that you had to trigger their filling up with eggs, but you don't. If you take good care of them, they'll fill up with eggs well on their own. And you can see in this tank, the majority of the females are already full of eggs and ready to breed. But one thing I will do, which is an old trick from the guppy breeders, is that in my attempts to breed the reddest males with the nicest color, then I want to choose the females with the best red in them. So you can see here that these females are all have pretty decently colored anal fins, and I also look for color in the dorsal if I can get it, and color in the body if I can get it. Before I choose breeders to be used in a breeding about to take place, what I will do is I'll feed them some color food for a week or so before I choose the females. Now in the old days, guppy breeders used to do this, and they used to use hormones and stuff, which really hurts the fish. This is just a color food pellet. They really like it. And then when it comes time, which is going to happen in another 3 or 4 days, to choose the females that we're going to breed, then they'll be nice and as red as they're going to be, so we can do that. Okay, this is about half of the females from that tank of females, and each of these females represents probably 5 or 6 that were called because these guys had better color. And so what the job here now is, I'm sure I've got there's some real good ones I saw when I was pulling these out, so I'm not going to go and look at all of the fish in the tank. I should be able to get the 6 or 7 I'm looking for in this group. I put a little flashlight on here, you can see some of the nice orange and some of the ventral fins. The thing about these guys is that not so much the females, but the males will totally wash out of color, and they'll look just like females when you get the males in this situation. Females will wash out the color in their bodies, but the finnage pretty much stays the same. You'll lose a little bit of the brightness, but you can tell who is real red in the anal fin and who isn't. So anyway, we'll go ahead now and I'll pick out 6 of the best. I'm looking for a combination of being heavily gravid and having good color, and age doesn't matter. And we'll get back to you here in a second. So I've chosen 7 of what look to be the best fish. And the thing about Odessa is that they're a high oxygenation fish. So I found that they don't last very long when kept in these tubs. For instance, if I was to go through and do about half of these and go have a cup of coffee and come back in a half hour, you'll start getting losses. So I'm going to get these guys back into their home tank. And then from there, the females that were chosen come over here, and they're floated in the breeding tank. I always introduce the females first, give them a sense of confidence and ownership of the area before I introduce the males. And also I run the breeding tank a bit warmer than what they're used to. So their normal tanks are probably 73, 74 degrees. This breeding tank is kept at about 77, 78 degrees. So there'll be a little bit of temperature acclimation on the part of the females being introduced. If I were to see them suddenly, breathing at the surface or showing any distress, then of course would let them go immediately. But you can see these guys are pretty robust and ready to go. And the color looked really good in the bucket, but it's even worse now because they've been out of the water, out of their tank for a while. But their color will come back once they're released. Okay, here's the females in the tank, getting their gauge around, feeling things out. And sometimes, now remember when you're doing this, there's like lots of little things, and so you forget stuff and you make mistakes, and that's normal. And you'll have times when you'll lose the batch a few times till, there may not be times when your young is what you expect, or the batch is suddenly smaller than other times. But eventually you get consistent at it, and you go along at it. I've probably done this now 40 times, and I screwed up a moment ago, and since I'm only doing this once for the video, I'll explain the mistake I made, and so that you won't make the same mistake. But these females should have been fed really heavily before they were put into the tank. So now that they're settled down a little bit, and you can see them swimming around here right in front, I'm going to go ahead and just put a little bit of flake food in for them. Whether they eat it or not, we'll see. But if they don't, that means they weren't hungry anyway. But this way, I don't want to put too much in. I don't want to, build up the organic load. If they're hungry, they'll eat, and they won't be interested in eating the eggs when the eggs start falling. So now I'll go get some males. They're not as easy. Before you start breeding, you want to make sure that you've got good pairs that are going to breed for you and going to produce for you. And what we do here is I separate the males from the females. Here's a tank of all males. There's a few females in here, but generally all my males are here. And in the batch that we're about to breed, the males that we'll choose will come from here. The first problem I had is when you have a group of males like this, and you see somebody you really like that guy right there, then how do you get that fish out of the tank? That sounds silly, but we'll get into that a little bit later as to how best to do that. But what I'll do is I'll use a big net, and I'll scoop up a bunch of them, and then with a flashlight go through the big net and pick out with a smaller net the ones I'm looking for. But in a batch of the size that we're going to be breeding here in a moment, we'll be grabbing 4 or 5 males and then putting them in with the females. I don't do anything special to prep them. They get fed twice a day here. Generally a dry food. Definitely if you were to breed them and you were to hit them with some live foods a bit before you breed them, you might have better success, but they breed pretty regularly and pretty eagerly. It's generally not much of a problem as long as they're healthy and they're well taken care of. Okay, the Odessa males are tough. When I first started this, I couldn't figure out how to get a specific fish. The way to do it is like this. You get a big net, get them all up in the corner, you scoop up a bunch, you try to disrupt them and disturb them as little as possible. Okay, we'll let them rest and settle down for a moment. Put a little light on them here. Then with a smaller net and a flashlight, you go in and you pick out the absolute best. In my case, what I'm looking for today, the black is pretty well settled on the better fish. The red is certainly settled well on the better fish. But what I'm looking for today is more green on the upper half of the body. I'm trying to develop more of that in the line that I have here. I had been focusing as well on the yellow in the dorsal to bring out more of that. And that has happened. But the green is not what it should be. So what I'm going to do is pick out 4 males from here, and we'll introduce them to the females over at the breeding tank. And these guys, I probably could have let them go let the females go a couple more hours in the tank, but it'll be about an hour later when these guys get put in with them. As you can see from a moment ago, they're settled down and they're no longer freaked by the tank at all. So we should be able to put them together and have them be just fine. So anyway, grab a few males. Okay, I got 4 really good quality males here. Real good black, real good red, and went through 3 net fulls to find 4 males that had various shades of blue-green spangling in their heads to try to bring out that green I was talking about. The longer they stay here in this little tub, the more their color will wash out. The one on the far left there, as you can see, has almost already lost its red stripe. But we'll go ahead now and float these guys into in with the females and let them go. These guys are also like the plecos in that the best colored and the best looking ones are going to be of the most recent generation. These guys were 4 of the younger fish in the tank. And the plecos here are the same way. Generally with everything here is within 2 generations. So when I get fish that go into their 3rd or 4th generation, they start getting big. Those are what always go to pet shops. And I very rarely carry older Odessas around. They're harder to ship, they don't ship as well, they cost more to ship. And these guys look even better, and this is about as big as I like to ship actually. These guys now are probably about a good 1.25 years old, maybe 1 year, 3 months, 1 year, 4 months. But these guys, whenever you're choosing your breeders, they're going to define what the line is from here on out. Because if you're only carrying 2 generations around with you, then you make a bad choice on breeders and you're screwed. Now, some people think that a line deteriorates over time when closely related fish are continually line bred like this. And if you actually think that way, then check with the Zephyr Stock Center that's been maintaining lines that came from 2 and 4 pairs of fish going back to the 1930s. So if you choose good breeders, you shouldn't have problems with deterioration in your line. These guys now have been with me for almost 7 years. I don't know how many generations that's been, but they roughly do a little less than 1 year per generation. So I can kind of give you the idea of how many generations of them there have been here. Now when they first get introduced, there's a male there. The females aren't paying any attention to them. The males are totally skitzed. What will happen here is over time, the males will get to be all washed out and they'll lose all their color. I saw a couple males already that are starting to look fairly white. But they're hiding in the plants and doing what they can to get acclimated to this very strange environment where the water is not very deep. And I do keep a couple of females in the male tanks so that the males know what a female looks like. And so they're not, not disturbed by that. The females were raised with males until they were separated at some point in probably about 8 months. So there's not an issue like with guppies or something where they've been raised apart for so long that when they see one another you don't get breeding. So what's good is when you start getting some chasing going around, not so much of the females in fear of the new fish that just invaded their space, which is what this is, but when you start seeing males chasing females to breed with them. And that usually starts happening, right now it's getting to be fairly evening, so they'll probably start breeding and chasing one another to spawn. in the early morning hours tomorrow. You can see at this point the males are still hanging out together. They really haven't paid much attention to the females. So what we'll do is get out of their way and let them do what they need to do. Now, on times when they haven't spawned, for instance, if I come out here in 2 days and females still look like they do today, because the females will definitely show that they've slimmed down once they've spawned. But if they haven't, the first culprit is usually temperature. Now, they need to be a little warmer. They like to be 77, 78. I will probably do a water change on them tomorrow. And but at this point, we'll let them get acclimated and get situated and accustomed to one another. And as you can see, there's not much interest in one another quite yet. Okay, so here's now kind of what I was talking about. We're at a half hour later. They've been in together for about a half hour. A couple of the males here have almost no color in them. And they just look kind of spooked because I'm standing here in front of the glass. But there's a male right in front. You can see he's totally lost all his red stripe entirely. So this is just a stage they go through. It's totally normal. They'll acclimate to the warmer temperature, to the confined space, to the new tank over the course of the next few hours. And usually they're nice and bright red and chasing one another in spawning activity by the next morning. But at this point, you can look at them and think, well, this isn't very promising. But that's not the case at all. And we'll take a look in here tomorrow morning and we'll see how they look. All right, everybody decided to come in for a group shot here. If I can zoom in at all without losing focus too much. But you can see how heavy those females are. There's the male that's lost a lot of his red. So hopefully we'll see an invigorated, entirely different group tomorrow morning. Okay, here we are on day 2. It's the next morning. The water looks good, nice and clear. The fish are in there, they're hiding in the plants, they're still a little spooked. You don't see really much chasing around, although that'll happen throughout the day today. And I think I'll hold off on putting any food in here. I went ahead and made sure that both the males and females were really stuffed with food before I put them in here, so that we don't have to put food into this tank, if possible. I may sprinkle something in there later on this afternoon, just so that they have something to eat. But you don't want them, you don't want a lot of food in the tank, but at the same time you don't want them hungry, because you don't want them eating the eggs that they lay. So they're bopping around back in here. Oh, here we go. Oh, looks like there is some breeding going on. The male's color is back. Females are zipping around. So today will be the big day for most of the spawning that will occur. We'll watch females, and then if they're all thinned down tomorrow, we'll pull them out. If not, sometimes I've let them go as long as 5 days. Temperature in here is right now at about 78 degrees. And we'll just keep an eye and see how it goes. The water level's probably just a touch high. I could bring it down a little bit. And we'll definitely do a 50% water change in here later on today. And the way that we'll do that is we'll fill the water level up to here. And then with a net breeder, we'll go ahead and sit the net breeder down in the middle of the tank there. And then siphon the water out of the breeder so that eggs and fry should be sucked out of the tank. So we'll do that a little bit later. So we haven't yet, I just fed them, we haven't yet done the first water change. And if you look really closely, it looks like there's probably maybe one female had dropped her spawn. There's some eggs down there. I mean, they're so newly laid that they really haven't fungused up much yet, the infertile ones. So the reason for looking right now is to make sure that there's nothing fundamentally wrong in the temperature, the water quality, or their liking. So evidently one has dropped some eggs, and it looks like the others should be going over that in the next couple of days. So the water change was done, and they've been fed once today. This is day 2, and now they're actively breeding. So you can see males chasing the females around, and this will continue for a couple more days. This method works well. I mean, I've not had all that many issues where they've been put into this and then for one reason or another they've decided not to spawn. That's only happened to me 3 or 4 times, and it was usually for other factors, like say the temperature was wrong, or there was something going on that I had to fix. But as a rule, you know, in this situation, this works real well, and they're more than happy to spawn if the conditions are right. And this is kind of what they're looking for. You'll usually have 2 males or 3 males chasing a single female, and then they go through the females that way. Okay, this is the second morning, the 3rd day. Things are pretty quiet in here this morning. Don't see much activity at all. Well, what I am going to do is feed the adults a little bit. Give them some dry food here, see if that'll bring them out. There's somebody zipping around. There they are. We'll let them eat. And once they get their stomachs filled up, we'll go ahead then and add some vinegar eels for the first batch of vinegar eels. And then about half an hour, 45 minutes later, we do another water change. So when looking really carefully through the Java moss here below the divider, and looking at the females, I can see that maybe 2 have spawned, but I don't see many eggs down here, and I don't see much down here that tells me there's a lot going on quite yet. In my experience, the majority of the breeding will be done today and then tonight. And I have sometimes let them go as long as 5 days in here. So what I'm going to do is only feed 1 container's worth, 1 2-liter, you know, half of a 2-liter container, 1 dose of the vinegar eels. And I'm going to put that in right now. And then in another half hour or so, then do a 50% water change, just like we did yesterday. Now, one of the things about vinegar eels is that, you know, one of the selling points is that, well, they're aquatic and they live in the water and all that. My experience has been that they don't last real long in the pure aquarium water, because they're coming out of a 50-50 vinegar distilled water mix, and I don't think they last much longer than 3 or 4 hours. So they'll cloud up the water if you let them go for any period of time. And so I always do water changes after I feed the vinegar eels, and I'm always careful about the amount of vinegar eels I feed. The issue is that when you put the vinegar eels in the water, then your water quality goes out the window. Now it becomes your responsibility to maintain the water quality. If you put in a full feeding of the vinegar eels, which is three of the half of 3 2-liter containers of the vinegar eels strained, into here, the water will cloud up and you'll kill everything within a couple hours. So when you put a feeding in, you let it go, you let them eat, then you do a water change, and then you're good. And I also try to avoid doing feedings of vinegar eels before you go to bed at night, so that you don't have a long expanse before the next water change. So the vinegar eels generally get fed at 8, 9 in the morning, 1 to 2 in the afternoon, and then again at 8 to 9 o'clock at night. When the night feeding happens, I do a water change right after it, and then I'll usually check again 11-ish or so before I go to bed to make sure it hasn't started to cloud out. And on that 8 to 9 o'clock feeding, I'll probably feed a little bit less of the, a little fewer of the vinegar eels than I would in the morning and the afternoon feedings. Right now we don't see any of the adults. They're all there, but they're hiding in the back. So here we are, about an hour later after we just fed. We're adding in the water here to bring the water level back up. Now I want to be clear that the water going in here is used aquarium water coming off of the central sump that I use for the plecos at another part of the room. This is not tap water. You never want to add even chlorinated tap water to a tank full of new eggs. Be sure to add only, where the best thing I used to always do is I would keep this tank next to a larger tank, and then that had clean water in it, and I would siphon water from that tank into this tank to do water changes. So yes, our 12 fish are, what is there? It's 11 fish are in here somewhere in the back. So you can see the water staying pretty clear. That's good. All right. Well, I'll see you tonight when we'll do this all over again. Okay, it's now the afternoon of the 4th day. I've caught a couple glimpses of the females and they look like they're thinned down. So we're going to go ahead and take the adults out. And this actually isn't as simple as it seems. I've got to remove all these plants, and the eggs are semi-adhesive. So what you don't want to do is remove the plants, remove the divider, and wait for young to show up, because the eggs will be stuck throughout the plants and the divider. So what I do is I reach in with the net handle here, get a group of plants. I'm going to put them in some water here just for a few moments. And we'll keep doing that throughout. And then as the adults are exposed, we'll pull them out and take a look at them. So these are the first couple I pulled out. Got a little male down there on the bottom right, and 4 females. And if you look, you can see that all 4 females are thinned down. So that's good. It means they all spawned. I believe I've got 2 more females and 3 more males in there to pull out. But it looks like it was a fairly successful spawning, and we'll see how they do. So from here, we'll just go ahead and let the males and females go back into their home tanks. Okay, so the adults are removed, and we have the tank here left. Of all the females, there was only 1 that didn't drop her eggs, so there's only 1 that didn't spawn. The others were all thinned down, and the males were all they looked pretty beat up, so they were happy to get put back into their tank. So now we've got this going. So what I usually do is I reach on in here, and I want to pull this divider up just enough so that the water current underneath the divider with the air stones is a bit better about getting the debris up into the water and up off the bottom. And so right now underneath is all cloudy and stirred up, which is fine. Remember, there's been no filtration going on this entire time. It's just got the 2 air stones going and the water changes. And that's how it'll stay. Now, the eggs can take up to 3 more days to hatch. So I usually leave the divider in here for at least another 2 to 3 days before I consider pulling it out. As well as the plants, because they're all full of eggs that are stuck to it and such. So I may bring my water level up just a little bit so those plants are a little more submerged. But I definitely don't want to go any deeper than about 1 inch from where they are now, where I'm going to start dealing with air bladder issues with the fry. And if I could raise the fry actually in water that was just 2 inches deep instead of this, which appears to be about 5 inches deep, that would even be better. Yeah, I think I'm going to leave the water level where it is. I'll just keep an eye on it. They were just fed vinegar eels a moment ago, and a water change was done before I pulled the adults out. So we'll keep an eye on this. And now, keeping it from clouding up becomes really important. And that's the issue now for the next 3 weeks, is to keep the water clean and keep the bacteria down, but keep food going in 3 times a day and water changes. And then by the time they're about a month old, but they're big enough to handle with a net, and you can split them up and get them out of this tank. When you're doing this, I tend to have the best results by thinking of each batch as being different. Efforts to try to standardize it and get it to where, okay, at this day you do this you do that. That can work to some extent, but with the vinegar eels that you're putting in here, there's a different amount of apple waste in the water that's going to follow the water here. There's different ages of the vinegar cultures you're taking from, so the water that they're in is going to have higher or lower ammonia levels. And the result is that with each batch, when you're feeding so much, you just kind of maintain this moving balance, and it's a new process each time. You really can't say, do it this way, exactly this way. You just got to keep watching the water, make sure it doesn't get cloudy, and make sure you're feeding at least 3 times a day. And then if possible, the babies aren't going more than 12 hours without being fed. And then lots of aeration. So anyway, we'll see how this batch turns out. Okay, so I just came down here. It's in the evening, late in the evening on day 3. And when you look closely here, you can see the water on top looks pretty good, but the water in the bottom is getting cloudy. So there's a bacterial bloom starting down there, so we have to do something. And we caught it at a good time. So all we got to do really is do a quick water change. And I'll do that here real fast, and then we'll take a look at it and see if that clears it up and get it. Now this is a 20 long tank of some baby plecos. And the reason this is here is because this water is what a bacterial bloom looks like. Now the plecos are they're a lot more tolerant, and this won't bother them in the least, and this tank's about to get a big water change. But this is what the water looks like when you start to get a bacterial bloom. In this case, this tank got this way because the beans weren't fully eaten, and it went overnight. So this is first thing the next morning. But if you see water this cloudy, about this color, a little bit of foam there at the water's edge, with the Odessa fry, then you know you have to do a water change immediately. This is about as dirty as or as white as you want to let the water get before you're going to start having losses. And one thing to keep in mind is that you keep wanting to look in this. I mean, it would be a week after I took the adults out before I'd see any activity in here in the past. Over time, I learned what to focus my eye on and to what to look for. And so usually I can see something in there by the time I take the divider out in another 2 or 3 days. You'll start seeing young swimming around and such. But right now, you know there's a lot going on in there. You know there's a lot of eggs in there. You'd like to think they're fertile. But at this point, you don't see squat. And it's easy to get discouraged, but you just have to trust that, that it's all going to work out. And no, I can't see squat in here either. So when you look through here, it's not like I can see stuff, eggs or fry or whatever, you know, that the camera can't pick up. At this point, I don't see anything either. So you just have to have faith. Sometimes after a big batch, maybe with less of the Java moss in there, you might see a sprinkling of white eggs, you know, the infertile eggs. And there's probably a little bit of this debris that we're looking at is that. But at this point, you know, don't be discouraged. The eggs are in there and they're coming along, and it's just up to us at this point to keep the water quality up and the food going in. And we won't see the results probably for another couple of days.